My family will start planting hopefully this weekend, and a lot of growers are beginning to have, planting season begin and thinking about buying inputs if they haven't already, locking in pricing. So on the input side of the equation, maybe Bruce, let's talk about some of the major inputs that we import into the United States.
And again, headlines tend to exaggerate everything, and the demise is exaggerated, the recoveries are exaggerated. And if you look at the economy in general first, we import about 11% of the GDP, export about 9%. In agriculture, it's a little bit higher on both ends of that because of the reliance on fertilizers that are not necessarily easy to build in the U.S. or mine in the U.S. or nitrogen comes from a lot of places, but not all of it, just the U.S. and steel. But these are also long-term industries, right? Mm-hmm. So putting on a 20% tariff on something that represents 20% of your inputs is a 4% change in cost. And much of it was, as you said, already contracted. So I think it's important to recognize that the hue and cry and the fire and the fury is never as good or as bad as the headlines might suggest.
Sure.
At the same time, it's hard to recover once you lose a supply chain. Mm-hmm. And so the Ukraine effect, the Ukraine war effect on fertilizer to South America was really oversized because that's where a lot of the fertilizer came from. And for us, a lot of it comes from Canada and the U.S. So there are things like that we use to illustrate. But I think the total complex, seed is a really big part. The seed doesn't necessarily have the impact of a tariff built into it because of where seed is grown. Steel, it takes a long time to wear out a tractor. And so if you do have a significant impact on steel and manufacturing industries, that's a very long-term effect. Yeah. It can still be devastating. But the inputs do proxy for a lot of other things because input costs and output values determine all the other things in between, like rents and values. And the land value has to eventually represent what it can earn. Steve is exactly right. The differential effects on things like permanent crops and row crops were really palpable. The differential effects going forward with this set of payments or offset payments or crop insurance program changes or whatever is important to recognize because, and again, for folks who haven't seen it, FarmDoc has an incredible library of things related to policy and policy payments. And what's happened since essentially Trump won, not just post-COVID, is we've moved to a very ad hoc payment system for agriculture. Mm-hmm. And we've, in most cases, more than made up for what you would say are the losses from things that were either externally imposed or internally experienced or oversupply or loss of a market or whatever the versions are or changes in RFS and so on and so forth. So put it all together, and the input complex is important, but pales in comparison to what you can sell the value of the commodity is what people are really going to focus on when it gets to the end of the day.